Hi and welcome to the second part of the Serverless website hosting. In this video we'll talk about setting up the backend services such as the API gateway, Lambda, and DynamoDB table. So in this scenario, when the users connect to our website and start making calls over the web to our API gateway, Lambda is going to process that request and perform those operations in the DynamoDB table. The post, patch, and delete methods will be performed on the DynamoDB table, but in this scenario we'll do something a little different with the GET request. On our website we have an interactable here where they could get a free copy of my resume or a picture of the dogs. So they will be able to choose which one they want and then do the GET request. The GET request will be called over the API gateway. The Lambda will process that request and then pull it from the S3 bucket. So I created a second S3 bucket and stored the files in this bucket. You don't have to create a second bucket, you could just store it in the bucket with the website that you're hosting. So I think that's it. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a role. Go into IAM, go ahead and click create role. Go ahead and click on Lambda. If it's not there, you could choose Lambda in the drop down menu. Go ahead and click next. Now we need to find 3 policies. The first policy is going to be DynamoDB full access. The second policy is going to be S3 to access our S3 bucket. And the third is CloudWatch to see our logs if anything's going wrong. So after these 3 are selected, go ahead and click next. Give it a role name and then create role. So after that's done, we need to create our DynamoDB table. Go ahead, click create table, give your table a name and give it a partition key. The partition key is very important. It's how we're going to query our database. So give it something that will uniquely define your table, like customer ID, or dog ID, something that's very unique. So once you do that, leave it as string and then go ahead and click table. So I name my table dog bar customers. So after that's done, don't worry about this right now, we'll get back to it. There's nothing else that we need to change. We'll go ahead and create our Lambda functions. Go ahead and click create function, give your function a name. The runtime, choose the latest version of Python. Permissions, choose the role that you just created and then click create function. After you create the function, get into that Lambda function, go into configuration, go to edit. The default memory is 128, but I've run into some errors using that amount, so just go ahead and change it to 500. Change the timeout to 1 minute. Make sure the existing role is the role that you created in IAM. Click save. Okay, so after that's created, go back to code, go into the Git repo, and then create 3 files in the Lambda functions exactly as the Git repo is. Because if you use a different file name, then these functions won't work, or these Lambda files won't work. So you can do that by just right clicking and creating a new file. Just gonna go ahead and delete that. So go ahead and copy this and then paste it in your Lambda function and go ahead and hit deploy. Don't worry about the code right now. We'll talk about the code in a separate video. Okay, so after that's created, let's create our API gateway. Go to create API, choose REST API, click build. Leave it on REST, new API, give your API name. Endpoint should be regional, and then click create API. So go into settings, go to add binary type, should be */*. Go ahead, click save. Go to resource, and then create a new resource. Give your resource name a path. In my case, I named it customer. Go ahead, enable cores, and then click create resource. After that's created, click on the newly created resource, and then go create a method. We're going to create one each for get, post, patch, delete. Choose Lambda function, choose proxy integration, choose the correct region, and then choose your created Lambda function, and then hit save. Do the same for the other methods. Okay. So after you go ahead and do that, make sure you hit save. I'm not gonna save it because it's gonna mess up my other API. So after you do that and you're done with this, go ahead and deploy the API. Any API that you create or any modifications in the API, you always have to deploy it. So if you didn't enable cores, what you could do, if you didn't enable cores when you set up this API, that's okay, because you could just enable cores and then just click enable cores. Don't worry about this, we'll talk about it in another video. So after that's done, go ahead and proceed to the next video. We'll talk about the Lambda code. We'll talk about cores and the process of what's happening in the backend. Thank you. I'll see you in the next one.